Hai Sobat Madani, selamat datang di Semoga Berkelanjutan Podcast. Perkenalkan, aku Salma, semoga berkelanjutan juga dalam jadi host podcast ini. Di sini kita bakal seru-seruan ngobrolin apapun yang berkaitan dengan bumi untuk mewujudkan kehidupan yang berkelanjutan. Di episode pertama season ini, kita akan membahas tentang jatuh bangunnya seseorang dalam mengelola bisnis yang berkelanjutan. Bersama narasumber kita yang luar biasa, Kak Monty. Hai Kak, selamat datang.
Hai Salma, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Do I look nervous?
No, not at all. A little bit.
Because I have to be honest, so we're in the same page.
Okay, no worries.
Jadi buat Sobat Madani yang mungkin belum tahu, Kak Monty adalah founder dan CEO dari topiku.co, brand topi berkelanjutan yang menyulap sampah ember plastik menjadi topi cantik yang gak hanya sustainable dalam hal menyulap sampahnya, tapi juga sustainable dalam model bisnisnya. Untuk lebih lanjut tentu kita akan ngobrol-ngobrol dengan Kak Monty di sini. Dalam podcast ini, Sobat Madani mungkin akan agak bingung why I'm switching between English and Indonesia. Apakah karena kantor Madani ada di Jakarta Selatan, makanya kita ngomong English and Indonesian? Kita akan tanya ke Kak Monty, why are you more comfortable speaking in English? And then, what are you culturally identify yourself? If that's an okay question, and then basically just tell us about yourself.
Of course.
Yeah.
So maaf, the mayoritas interview ini di bahasa Inggris.
It's okay.
So my bokap dan nyokap gue dari Jakarta, but I grew up and was born in California. So I speak English way better than Indonesian, and I only moved back here like 2018.
But you understand Indonesian, right?
I do understand it. Harus kalau kerja sama local artisans in Bandung. Yeah. So you were born in the US. You were raised in the US also. Exactly, yeah.
And the first language that you speak is English.
Yes.
And then what other languages do you speak?
So I do speak some Bahasa, and I also speak Spanish.
Okay.
So being a mixed kid growing up in the US, I actually look more Latino than I do look white, or I do look Asian, right? Most people think I am. So when I first moved, so I was born in the States, but then I spent the first 6 years of my life in Jakarta. But then when I moved in 2001, I identified as Asian, but I looked too white for the Asian kids, and I looked too brown for the white kids. So the people who accepted me were the Latinos.
Yeah, Latinos accept everyone.
Yeah.
They call you son. Is that racist?
No.
Am I not allowed to say?
No, you're okay.
I am okay. Don't cancel me.
No, I mean, the funny thing is, even Topiku is part of a self-identity journey for me as well, in terms of being a mixed kid, as well as not knowing where I belong. Having a company like Topiku really gave me a lot of direction to...
Yeah, because you built Topiku from the scratch, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So we want to ask about Topiku. What is it?
So Topiku sells the world's most sustainable hats. So we work together with Indonesian artisans in Bandung to help pay them fair wages, as well as make hats all out of upcycled and recycled waste materials.
You say most sustainable. Is that self-proclaimed? Or
That's self-proclaimed, but we have all the facts to back it up.
How?
Well, for one, we've published the world's first carbon footprint report for a baseball cap. So no other company has publicly released that data before. But no other clothing company or other... So when it's specifically for a cap. So companies like Nike and Adidas have published their carbon footprint reports, but there's no publicly available data on how much their hats emit. So we publish that data. We're the first ones to have that publicly available for anyone to visit, essentially because we have nothing to hide. So Topiku, the name my hat in English. So we want our customers to take ownership of their products. So providing them who made my hats, what made my hats, where did they come from, so that someone can say, this is my hat, this is my product, because I have all the information of how it was made, and it feels good.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy. I didn't know that you want to make people who buy Topiku and wears it feels like the cap is also theirs. So how was it founded? What was your inspiration? Why did you decide it was cap? It's not socks or like clothes or like pants. Why is it cap?
So for context, I actually didn't really care about environmentalism or anything growing up. I was definitely aware of it. Bolak-balik dari California to Jakarta, I always noticed the big disparity in waste management systems. And I always wondered, like, okay, why is it that Indonesia has such a hard time dealing with waste? So I was always aware of it, but I didn't necessarily want to do anything about it. Because, for a lot of people, it seems like such a hopeless task, such a big problem. How are you going to help, play your part in tackling this issue? So my childhood dream, because I played with Legos and I liked building houses in The Sims, I thought, oh, that means I'll be a good architect. So it was like childhood dream. I got into my dream school, which was USC for architecture.
USC is University of
Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was, again, dream school. I made it. Long story short, my final review, I spent like 3 all-nighters preparing my final project. And then I had to present in front of 100 of my classmates and then 6 jury members. And after I finished presenting, my tired eyes, just like, oh, here's my life's work. And then I had one professor who asked me, he's like, Monty, are you a sensitive guy? And I said, no. And he says, in my 30 years of teaching architecture at USC, you have the absolute worst project I have ever seen. In front of, like, publicly embarrassed and, like, walking off the stage, I was definitely crying. I was like, I cried, yeah.
I would cry. I
got shamed, yeah. No, at the time, the funny thing is, in hindsight, I actually would say I am a sensitive person now. I mean, that's a whole other story, but in regards to that, like, my childhood dream was a failure, so I didn't know what to do. So I ended up going back from California to Indonesia. One thing that, even though I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to do, I think I always had these values inside of me since I was younger. And one of those was like, oh, I enjoy helping people. So I went to volunteer at a yayasan, at
You're
a nonprofit.
A sensitive person. That's what a sensitive person would do.
I think so.
Yeah.
And nowadays I realize I'm a lot more empathetic.
Yeah.
Side note, last year I went through a huge, like, I guess, emotional, spiritual awakening. So that's a topic for later in the discussion maybe. But to back onto Topiku, so I volunteered at a nonprofit, and this is actually where I learned about upcycling. So, upping the value of waste, turning it into a product of higher quality or higher value than the original. So this nonprofit I volunteered at created a lot of products from leftover billboards, and I was really inspired by their model because they worked with pemulung families, so trash picker families, where the men would collect waste dari TPA, the women would sew products, and then proceeds would support their kids. And I was like, this sounded so cool to me at the time, and I was mostly a creative person, Karena, architecture.
Yes.
And I wanted to create a product from upcycled materials. So I actually was looking through their stock room to see what kind of materials they had. I didn't like a lot of their bahan because it still looked like trash. They would have like
the end product still looks like trash too.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I don't want to. That's why I don't want to say their name. Like, I think it's such an awesome concept, and they taught me a lot from my experience being there. But like, the end product still looks like waste. And if we really want to change, the products and what is offered to consumers, we have to make competitive products that don't look like waste. And I think it's super important when we're doing these sorts of products for the main market that they're able to meet the quality, comfort, aesthetics, the durability of a normal product.
Because I honestly, as someone who doesn't usually wear caps, I would buy your caps. Because it was made from upcycled products, but it doesn't look like waste.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal too, is to we want. Some people, I remember when I was starting off, were like, oh, who are your competitors? There's no other sustainable hats back in 2015. Yeah. But my competitors, I want someone who's shopping to decide if they want to buy a Nike hat or if they want to buy a Topiku hat. I want to make that same, purchasing decision. Yeah. I don't want to alienate just the people who care about the planet. I want to win over consumers who, you know, are just an everyday consumer. So going back to why hats, well, I was growing my hair out at the time, and then I was trying to get the man bun. I spent like a few months growing my hair out, and I was in the awkward middle stages, you know, so I had to wear a lot of hats to cover my hair. And then I just found this material, which was car seat upholstery, so similar to the seats that we're sitting on right now.
Oh, so it's not ember, but car seat.
So the main, this is from my original prototype.
Oh, okay.
So I found this material at this nonprofit, which was this car seat upholstery, and I thought it'd make a good substitute for hat material. But again,
it's durable.
Exactly, it was durable and it felt right. But you know, eventually it was just a creative art project, I call it. Belum business. And I had no idea like that I was going to be embarking on this journey of becoming an entrepreneur. That was like August 2014. I went back to uni. I switched majors.
You switched majors?
Yeah.
But did you finish the architecture?
I finished with a minor in architecture, actually. But
what is your major?
I switched to something called geodesign.
Geodesign.
So geodesign is the use of GIS science to essentially...
But GIS is something like...
Yeah, like mapping based.
Yeah.
So essentially it's like sustainable city planning.
Oh,
so I learned a lot about, you know, sustainability through that degree, but I did not want to focus on the public policy aspect. I wanted to build sustainable communities, but through business. So that's kind of what happened with Topiku. You know, it went from creative art project to meeting my business partner in March 2015, and then he was the one who was a serial entrepreneur. In 2015, he already like sold his first company. Like he was a hustler, and he was the one who convinced me like, hey, let's turn this art project Topiku into a social enterprise. So we started with a Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign, and then I didn't believe in the possibility of it until, you know, was that January 2016 when we finished and closed our campaign. We raised 21,000 USD, and I kind of realized at that point, like, oh my gosh, like this is possible to create a business out of upcycled materials.
So where is the store? So where is Topiku based? Is it in Indonesia or in the US?
So Topiku is actually based in California.
Oh, okay.
we don't have any physical stores. We do
it's all
e-commerce.
online?
But these days we're mainly a sustainable hat manufacturer. So essentially what we do, we're kind of this, we're kind of in the middle area of a supplier and a clothing brand, because we worked very hands-on with our artisans. And what we do is we go and collect all the materials that they use for the labor, as well as we ensure they're getting paid different rates when we're working with them versus when they're working for, you know, Topi Biasa or for like the local pasar.
So where do most of your customers from? Like where do your products go?
So if it's for our B2C, it's normally in the US. California is definitely our biggest market. But for B2B, around half of our orders come from the US. Then we have the UK, Canada, Australia. I mean, Europe's definitely a really big market, and Singapore is really growing as well. And that's all for custom hats.
Sorry, I'm very dumb in this kind of economics and all the B2B, B2C. Yeah. I can't really imagine that. But B2B, where do you sell your hat? Like,
so it's
who
just like,
is using your hat?
It's like custom hats for, let's say, hospitality industry, for other apparel brands, for tech companies who are giving merchandise to their employees. I mean, corporations as well.
Oh, okay.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll definitely like touch more on it later, but our physical product is a hat. But since we focus so much on the transparency and traceability, authenticity of our supply chain, that's actually our competitive advantage. So our physical product's a hat, but what we actually sell is a good feel-good brand image. So that's why we have all these brands that want to work with us for custom headwear.
Okay, that makes sense. So you have told us about the yayasan that you volunteered, and then how did you switch from the car seat thing to the plastic buckets?
So
did you have a team? Like, Was it only you founding
Essentially,
this
at the start, it was all me, and I had my co-founder helping me in the U.S.
But who started like trying out from plastic buckets and all the, we call it research and development.
Yeah. R&D.
Yeah,
that was like pretty much all me. And then later in 2018, my current business partner, who was an intern at the time, his name is Jeff. He helped me a lot with the R&D as well. But
okay.
For context, so it's definitely important to tell you the history of Topiku. So, we launched with our crowdfunding campaign in January 2016. I, at this time, was still, a creative guy who only wanted to do the creative side. My co-founder, Anthony, he was the guy who's the serial entrepreneur. I was like, hey, you already know how to do all this stuff? Like,
you do that.
Oh yeah, I'll do the supply chain, the creative stuff, the kind of like the soul of the company. You sell it, you market it, you do all the pitches, you do all the public speaking. I'm just gonna be behind the scenes. And because that's where I was comfortable. I was a very anxious, insecure, young adult at the time when I was in college. Okay. I think I was when we officially launched, I was like 19 years old or 20 years old in January 2016.
We were there.
Yeah.
Insecure and
oh yeah, and that definitely was like a big part of my own self-growth journey.
Yeah.
The cool thing about running my own social enterprise was, even if I didn't know who I was, I know who I wanted my company to be. And essentially, let's see, January 2016 we launched. 3 months after, it was Earth Day at USC, and my partner Anthony got invited to do a talk at USC for Earth Day. And the day before the event, he told me, he's like, hey man, I have to go to this frat party in Las Vegas. Monty, you have to do the talk. And oh man, like the world stood still. I just freaked out. I was like, there's no way I can do public speaking. No way.
It's D-1.
Yeah, like right before the event. And I remember him telling me,
I
like,
would faint.
Oh yeah, I was so scared. And he told me like, hey, like, I still remember, like, if you don't do this, no one will. And I was like, kind of like, all right, well, I guess I have to do it then. The talk ended up going really well, but sadly, when I got off the stage, I got a call from Anthony's girlfriend that my co-founder Anthony was in an accident, which was and he's actually was paralyzed, so he's actually still in a wheelchair to this day. Fortunately, he's doing well with his recovery. He's still a big hustler, but during our founding days, he wasn't able to help as much as he wanted to because he had to heal.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to do a lot of things on my own for the first year and a half, 2 years. So as an anxious individual, like, I did not want to step into the role of a businessman growing my company.
Yeah.
What happened was I ended up staying to my anxious stage, which was just, what? The funny thing with anxiety, right? We care a lot about what other people think of us, right? Well, when that translates to business, I was like, I have a sustainable company. I don't want anyone to think that I am not eco-friendly. I don't want anyone to think I'm greenwashing. You know what I mean? That social anxiety translated to my business, where I was like, okay, I want to make sure that I build a sustainable supply chain. And what I mean that is, like, it is ethically responsible, environmentally responsible. And I essentially spent all my time, my spring breaks, summer breaks, I would use the budget and money we raised from our crowdfunding campaign to build our supply chain. So I would fly back to Indonesia and look for like a manufacturer or suppliers to source fabrics from. Even finding our artisans was a very like serendipitous,
Oh yeah,
moment.
Because I heard that your artisans is from Bandung.
Yeah,
how do you meet them?
So context again, in 2015. So I met my artisans March 2015, I think. So like right before I started working, after I already knew I wanted to do a crowdfunding campaign. So at the time, my understanding of sustainability was just the environmental aspect. I did not understand that it's, people, planet, profit.
Yes.
I just understood planet. So I wanted to find waste materials, and then I found a manufacturer. So literally just Google search. I was like, hat making factory. And then
like TPA.
Yeah, like I was just like blah 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 blah. I found a factory in Bandung, and on the way to this factory, I knew nothing about it. You know, I had no idea about the conditions. But on the way from Jakarta to this factory, we started to go through a more rural village area, like more of a local desa, and then it started to rain, and the road flooded, banjir, so we got stuck. So I actually never ended up making it to that factory. I was stuck in this desa, and I stopped and asked for directions, and it turned out to be a hat making village. So, you know, it's
That's
like
a great coincidence.
Yeah, it was a very like, you know, it was completely accidental. I remember like I knocked on the door of a house, and then the guy was like cari apa? I was like, oh, a pabrik topi, and he's like, oh, desa ini bikin topi.
The whole desa?
Yeah, and we've worked with the same community, Desa Rahayu, for the last 7 years now. They have become our partners. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And wow, no, like, you know, I always talk about how I'm an accidental entrepreneur because all these things have just fallen into place of just like finding out where I'm supposed to be, and, you know, kind of finding my calling or purpose along the way.
There's nothing accidental though. It's all calling.
Yeah, no, it's a little spooky. Yeah, it's cool.
Okay, so I want to go back to where your caps go. You said it was mostly for business too, because B2B is business to business, right? And then you don't have any offline store, so you do all the shippings. How and then how do you manage all the emission from the shipping in your business? Totally. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so when it comes to emissions, so we strictly work with like upcycled and recycled materials. So when we talk about what upcycled waste fabrics are, essentially we're looking at leftovers, sisa potongan, as well as dead stock fabrics. Okay. So those types of materials, dead stock fabrics, essentially is just like the leftovers from production.
So it's not actually waste, it's sisa.
Well, yeah, sisa. So that is considered post-industrial waste. So there's two main types of waste. There's post-industrial and post-consumer. So we take post-industrial.
Oh, okay.
So essentially for me, it was like, I actually didn't understand the fascination with finding like mushroom leathers and all these sustainable alternatives. I was like, why do we need to do this stuff when there's so much leftover like byproducts from industrial processes? So going back to like the car seat material, that was like brand new car seat material imported from Japan. But because the Indonesian car market, which one wants like leather kulit seats, they take that brand new material off, and then it's considered waste. So for me, I was thinking like, okay, if one car company is doing this with one car model, imagine how many thousands of other industrial processes are wasting, you know, materials. So Topiki was kind of an exploration of, okay, I'm going to find these suppliers, these manufacturers, and get their leftover materials. So, you know, we essentially are able to get a lot of our like nice quality materials for dirt cheap, because it's leftover waste that these factories just want to get rid of.
Okay.
So that's kind of like our business model essentially is save money on materials, reinvest it into our artisans, and then we can sell premium products internationally. So, you know, it's all an exploration of how can the waste byproducts of one industry become the input materials of another industry. So I was taking...
And which industry that the materials that you use? So
we actually, the main material we're using now is organic cotton twill. And we were purchasing leftovers from a curtain manufacturer. So sisa produksi korden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I've read that actually the fashion industry, especially the fast fashion industry, they actually produce more than what they can sell. Is that like I don't know, maybe one day you'll get into that or not?
Well, it's like when you think about these statistics in the fashion industry, it's absolutely insane, like how much gets the leftovers themselves is so crazy. So a lot of companies, big name brands will work with textile suppliers, and then by contract, any leftovers have to be destroyed or thrown away. So, for example, let's say IKEA wants to order 100,000 meters of fabric.
Yeah.
Because of rejections or imperfections, they'll maybe produce 105,000 meters. So there'll always be leftovers from production, always. And then, it's just maybe a little blemish or a little mark, but then it's not good enough for the quality of what an international brand is looking for. So these materials will normally have to be destroyed, but some suppliers will kind of trying to resell them to local markets. Even I've spent my time digging around for different fabrics as well. In my searches, I've found these warehouses where essentially you'll have 12 factory owners from China who are by contract from their international brands like Gap or Nike or whatnot to destroy the leftover fabrics. But because they want to save their money, they'll actually end up smuggling the leftover materials to a country like Indonesia. They'll stockpile it in a warehouse that all these factory owners own. And then people from Pasar Majestic or any of these local fabric areas will purchase these leftover materials and resell them to the Indonesian market. Yeah.
That's very ironic.
Yeah.
I don't really like listening to that.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of different leftover materials, and it's for me, I'm kind of shocked that it's there's not a lot of brands going to the sources like I am.
Why do people think that we need to make more and not use what we have left already?
I think because it takes a lot of effort to build it, in the sense of I invested maybe 2.5-3 years of my life going on these flying over from California to Indonesia to look for these different sources. I had the luxury of, again, going back to that anxiety. I never wanted to grow my company at the first 3 years because I didn't know how to. I was I'm waiting for my co-founder to get healthy and join me again. I just stuck to my anxiety of I don't want anyone to ask any questions that I can't answer. I want to be able to answer everything. So that's why I would literally go knock on doors of local fabrics, and I would just be hey, where's your sisa kain? I want to buy it. And I'd usually be the first person to ever ask these produksi or pabrik korden, yo, I want to buy your leftover materials. Yeah.
It does take a lot of work from your story.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't think big companies would like to spend that amount of time to actually switch their business model and such to do so. But I hope a lot of people do what you're doing.
It's definitely more challenging for a big business, because even at our scale now as an SME, there are issues with scalability or getting the same exact color fabric for repeat orders. So getting all that stuff and being on a production schedule is definitely where the challenge is in upcycling, because we're relying on the leftovers of different industries. It's inconsistent. And for example, the produksi korden that we used to get our sisa potongan from, they closed shop during the pandemic, so we had to look for other sources.
And then you have to do that, but you already have the experience, so it doesn't take that.
We have our other sources, and then we look for our certified suppliers and things like that.
Talking about the garment industry, the garment industry is actually notorious for poor treatment of workers. And then they use child labor. They pay their workers badly. Is that a word?
Very
poorly. And then I've read from your website that it says that it says that fair pay is vital to your business. Can you tell us more about that?
So when we talk about fair pay, I like to zoom out for a second too, and going to what I understood about sustainability, I only understood the environmental aspect, and it wasn't until I met this community that I realized that, wow, the social sustainability, the people part of sustainability is by far the most important. Even if we talk about environmental sustainability, that's actually socially motivated, because the most eco-friendly solution is to kill all humans. Mother Nature would love that. But no, we're selfish. We want to live on Earth. So environmental sustainability is about finding harmony with humans and nature. Financial sustainability, that's also about how can we continually supply livelihoods for people. So it's all socially motivated at the end of the day. And whenever I talk about this aspect of Topiku, and anyone asks if they want to become a sustainable brand, I always tell them the people aspect is so much more important than everything. And
because when you think about it, the environmental aspect is kind of like the outcome of what you're doing, from empowering people and then finding the development from the manufacturing and such, and the outcome that you get is the environmental products, and you can say that
exactly. So like when it comes to like fair wages, what we do is we treat them like humans.
Yes,
that's the main thing. And when we talk about the standards in the garment industry, so if we think of like big fast fashion brands that are working with suppliers in, let's say, Bangladesh, maybe you've heard of the Dhaka factory collapse in 2013.
The one where it's not in Bangladesh, it was in India.
So there was one called the Rana factory collapse that was like, I think over 1,000 people died and 2,000 got injured, and they're all garment industry workers.
From the collapsed building, right?
Yeah. So essentially the way that something like that happens is, let's say a fast fashion brand will go and shop around for the cheapest price in an area like Bangladesh, India, or Indonesia, and they'll, in their pursuit for the lowest cost, that, fast fashion is cheap because it comes at the price of something else.
Yeah.
Whether it's the people or the planet. In most situations, it's the people. So factory owners will cut wages so that they can supply the lower cost for these different brands. And what happens is, like, fast fashion brands like that the factory owners will cut costs on maintenance, which leads to them not upkeeping their building, which essentially is what leads to, the factory collapse happening.
Yeah.
And for us to provide fair wages is essentially paying more for the cost per hat. So most sustainability efforts are about education, right? But when we talk about social enterprises, we need to create scalable solutions that can last a long time. And me personally, I don't want to go to these different desas and suppliers and just be like, oh, jangan pakai plastic, blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to find solutions.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, if you make this hat using my upcycled materials, I'll pay you double what you normally make. So it's like our cost per hat, like we're paying our manufacturers like it's very simple math. Like one Topiku hat is equal to two like cheaper hats. So we teach them like the value of sustainability. And then like during the pandemic, the amazing thing is we kind of validated our business model, because our artisans were normally producing cheap topi pasar for, like, if you're like in Bali, you see like pinggir jalan, they're selling the Bali hats over there. That's a lot of like these communities will make those cheap topi pasar. Now, zaman pandemi, they lost all demand for cheap topi pasar, but then every month they're seeing Topiku place bigger and bigger orders because we scaled during the pandemic. So for them to see the financial resilience of sustainability, of having a sustainable product, means that it's more resilient to change because you're ahead of the market.
Yes.
So essentially we got to, evade any of those troubles during the pandemic because we're just placing bigger and bigger orders.
I am genuinely fascinated and actually curious on how you put such attention to every business every business process, from the source and then from the paying for the workers and then etc. But the product itself is still affordable. Like how do you calculate all of that?
So number one, like we kind of look at, let's see, a lot of the markups that come within clothing apparel is just strictly clout based, like hype beast stuff. So like streetwear hats are normally like 35 USD. Okay. So we wanted to kind of match that price, but also give reasoning to why it's priced like that. And that's for the international consumers, because they value sustainability as like a purchasing decision.
But like a lot of business, eco-friendly business in Indonesia, I will not say any names, but because they sell the sustainability and then they're selling that it is green, it's sustainable, the price from their products is actually very, very expensive, and not a lot of people can afford that. They cannot choose to live a sustainable living style, but with your products, it doesn't happen like that. Why?
I think it's like there's like a delicate balance within pricing. Normally, what I would say when it's like sustainable apparel is, obviously there's a limit to it, because there's some brands that go way over the top and you're paying like 2 juta for like yoga pants.
Yes.
When it's like, you know, the material is not that expensive. But essentially, these sustainable brands are factoring in the true cost. So that's taking in the people, planet, and profit. So cheap products are only cheap because they don't care about the people or the planet. So kind of like the sustainable price is not actually more expensive, it's the true price, and everything else is just offered at a lower price because they're sacrificing people and the planet.
We just don't see it yet.
Yeah, but that being said, there's some brands that go overboard with that sustainable premium, you know, and you know what they're going to see is that they're not going to be able to survive a long time because they don't have enough market access, especially in a place like Indonesia. Us, on the other hand, because we can make a bigger profit overseas, we sell our hats at a 50% discount in Indonesia because we want sustainability to be more accessible. So it's kind of when like you start to see the intentions behind different brands, like what are you doing? Are you just trying to get on this hype train of greenwashing because eco-friendly is hot, or are you actually trying to educate the you know, people on why they should shop more sustainably? And if you're in a country like Indonesia, we're still in this, I would say, education and awareness phase, where it's business's job to teach consumers why they should care, why they should spend that much.
Yes.
Or they should also just make it more accessible. So
I cannot agree more.
And like for you know, the honest truth too, like something like our brims. So this is made dari recycled ember, like recycled HDPE plastics.
That's where the ember goes.
Yeah, so the plastics are just in the brim, and this was actually made already by our artisans before I ever showed up.
Oh, really?
Because recycled plastic buckets were cheaper than buying new plastics.
Oh, okay.
So there are like, you know, economic benefits to using recycled materials. Something like, let's say a cardboard packaging company. Buying recycled cardboard is always going to be cheaper than the new cardboard. Yes. So, you know, there are ways to lower your cost by taking leftover materials. Same with us, like getting leftover sisa produksi korden. I was paying really cheap prices for that material, and it's good quality stuff. It's just sisa potongan. Yes. So like, you know, not a lot of companies are honest with how much they're paying for that kind of stuff. But for us, it's like, okay, we save this money on materials, which means we can reinvest into our artisans. Yes. So offering them like kasbon, helping on like if they need any medical cost assistance, improvements into facilities. We're very engaged with rebuilding and improving their facilities, as well as donating that to other projects outside of our desa, because we are serious about sustainability. And, you know, we never have people anymore hesitating on our price because they see all the good things we do, you know, and it just comes to transparency at the end of the day.
I just want to say that I can sense that you're being very genuine with your brand, and then you're very passionate about it. And
thank you.
I feel like I want to just compliment you on your ideas and your business, but we have to take a break.
Okay.
Thanks.
Of course.